Okay, so we had a recent announcement from Raspberry Pi that the version of Raspberry Pi OS has just been updated, so let's have a look at it. I'm currently running one of the beta versions of it, and I've installed the KDE Plasma desktop interface because I really like the way that it works. But let's go to Imager and go to Choose OS, and you'll see that if we click on Raspberry Pi OS Other and scroll down to the 64-bit version, which is this one, and it says compatible with Raspberry Pi 3, 4, 400 and Raspberry Pi 5. There are 32-bit versions which are available for older Pis, but the 64-bit has always run better on the Pi 3 and later. So let's click on that, choose storage. Well, I've got no drive plugged in at the moment. I'm running the operating system from this M.2 drive via a USB hub, and it's working fine. I'm still waiting for my 5-volt Raspberry Pi adapter. That's the Raspberry Pi 4 one. So let's plug in this 32 gig SSD drive. I've got a USB to SATA adapter, and let's plug that in, and that will show up, and it does straight away. And I love the way that KDE Plasma announces what drives have been plugged in and everything. So let's click on that drive and let's hit right and yes. And that's just finishing up. And by the way, Raspberry Pi Imager is available on Windows, Linux and Mac OS. And I've got videos on my channel if you haven't got one of those devices and you need to be able to install an operating system on a Raspberry Pi. So let's hit continue, and I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to unplug the SATA drive, which is that one, and oh, actually I can press the button on the Pi now because the Pi 5 has a button, and this will now launch it.
To install the screen reader, press Ctrl-Alt-Space.
Okay, that's all booted up. Let's go to the announcement because it was a big long announcement with loads of information in it. And I chose Firefox because they'd mentioned that Firefox is more improved on Wayland. So it gives us a few, the Raspberry Pi website, a privacy notice, and welcome to Firefox. So let's go to the site, go to News, and full screen that. And I'm on it. This is my tablet video. And thanks to Tom Turchenbauer for letting me know that my video had made it onto the Raspberry Pi news site. But this is the story we're interested in today. Bookworm, the new version of Raspberry Pi OS. So I'll put a link in the description, but I'll just pick out a few things on there. So this is Debian Bookworm, and it's made up of incremental updates of the software that was in the previous Debian Bullseye releases. They've made a few changes, but mostly they won't affect Raspberry Pi users. But the big thing on this build is it's built on Wayland. And Wayland is the window manager, and they always used X11 before that. But as you can see here, for the last 35 years or so, most Unix desktop environments, including the Raspberry Pi, have been based on X11. It says here, the primary advantage of Wayland is performance. Under X11, there are two separate applications involved in drawing a window. The display server is used to create windows on the screen and to give applications a place to draw their content. The window manager is used to position windows relative to each other and to decorate windows with title bars and frames. Under a Wayland system, these two functions are combined in a single application called the compositor. So an application only needs to talk to one thing rather than two in order to get its windows drawn. And it also mentions this system is more secure now because of Wayland. And the compositor they're using is called Wayfire, which they're saying works much better on the Raspberry Pi than Mutter did. But you're only going to get Wayland on the Raspberry Pi 4 and 5. If you boot Raspberry Pi OS on a 4 or 5, you'll now get the Wayfire desktop. It should look pretty much identical to the desktop you're using from Bullseye, but appearances are deceptive. It's taken a lot of work to get to the point where the two desktop environments look the same. And they do, I mean, to be honest, I didn't think about it. It looks incredibly similar. Things like all the settings and the preferences and everything, it just felt the same. And I'm obviously used to using Raspberry Pi OS. So yeah, it certainly wasn't jarring for me. So it's a new application for launching programs, and it's called Wayfire Panel, but again, I hadn't noticed. So they've extensively modified it to look and work like LX Panel, porting all the existing LX Panel plugins, the icons which control volume, network, Bluetooth, etc. Desktop background itself is still drawn by the old PCMan file manager. I really like PCMan as a file manager, and it's really good for connecting to my NAS drive. So go network, and it just shows all your network drives. Some file managers don't make it that easy. And also I like, which I've been using recently in my PlayStation 2 video, if you want to launch a location in terminal. So say for instance we had something in our documents folder. I can go tools and open current folder in terminal, and you're already there, so it just kind of takes out a step, and I really like the way that works. Super simple, really reliable, easy to search as well, so you can see find files. Talks about how it uses graphics. They're all Wayland compliant now. They can detect when an application is using them and running in a Wayland environment, and then route all graphics calls over the Wayland protocol. So that's Wayland. Basically everything you see on the desktop is now being drawn completely differently from the way it was drawn under Bullseye. But if I've done my job right, you shouldn't notice any significant differences. One thing you might notice is that Wayland allows us to add some nice eye candy. Windows now have subtle shadows and they open and close with animation rather than just appearing and disappearing. Yeah, it's done a great job because I'd hardly noticed. And in fact, did I notice the windows appearing and disappearing? I probably didn't. But yeah, I can see that they do. The power plugin is enabled by default. You'll notice that I haven't had the power thing come on even though I'm using a Pi 4 adapter. But if you plug too many things in, if you're not using the official Pi power supply, you may find that you get those warnings. So low power supply voltage or excess USB current. If either occur, a notification will be displayed to let you know what has happened. And if the icon, if it comes up, you just click on it and it goes away. But obviously it's there for a reason. So we've got a GPU plugin, shows the graph of the load of Raspberry Pi's GPU. So you can see it's not on the screen at the moment, but if we go to here, right click, add remove, and we can put things like CPU, add to the right, CPU temperature, add to the right, GPU, add to the right, and then if we click OK, yeah, here they all are, CPU, CPU temperature, and GPU. Very nice. And you can usually customize these as well. So with the temperature, I've often changed some of the colors and things. So if I'm matching this theme, then I might change that background. Oh, that's not the background. That's the background. And then change the foreground color. And hit OK. And I generally move the taskbar. I don't like the taskbar on the top. I don't know why. I generally move it down. So if I just minimize that and desktop preferences, and you can see menu bar, and you can just choose bottom. I like to make it bigger. So 48 by 48, I just think it looks cooler. I also tend to change this to match the theme. So if I was matching, this that's there, then I would change the color to maybe like a darker blue. And then I would change the writing on it to say white or something that's contrasty, just because I think it looks a bit nicer. As mentioned above, work on Wayfire is ongoing. We're still optimizing for the hardware of earlier models of Raspberry Pi and hope to be able to roll out the Wayland desktop experience for all models of Raspberry Pi in due course. So they've changed how they draw the graphics, they've changed how they control the sound, Pipewire audio system, and I haven't had any issues. The sound has been working fine for me, even when I installed the GNOME desktop environment and also KDE Plasma. Manages Bluetooth audio devices better, remembering which ones were in use at power down and automatically reconnecting them at boot. Well, that will start to make up for, I know a lot of people are a bit disheartened that we lost the 3.5mm analog jack, but if it's going to automatically pick up our Bluetooth speakers, that may appease some people. Definitely not everybody though. And it's more secure under the Wayland environment, where applications are isolated from each other. If I go down to the bottom here, like if I right click, you can see here it says USB. I've got the USB adapter. The reason I use that is if I send the audio through that, my capture device isn't going to get any audio through HDMI. So sometimes I'll record a video and there'll be a game I'm playing or something, and there's music playing in the background, there's a video playing in the background, and I'm not aware of it because my capture device is recording it. But if I route the audio through USB, then I don't have to think about it. I know that it's only going to come from my speaker. And you can see volume control is here as well. It's on max by default. So the network manager has the ability to connect to hidden wireless networks, to connect to virtual private networks, and to use Raspberry Pi as a wireless hotspot. Oh, let's try that. So click on this, advanced options, create a Wi-Fi hotspot. Okay, let's call this Lee PSP video. Wi-Fi security, let's go WPA. Let's create a password, ABC123, nice and secure. Oh, it's not enough. 456. So ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In fact, we can show that just to show. And then create. So on my iPad, you can see now under other networks, I've got Lee PSP video. So if I do the password of ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, weak security, but there were other options on there. And there was also the option of none. And that's connected. So that now is working through my Raspberry Pi. So if I was to do a speed test, we can see if that's working. My Wi-Fi is not that fast. I'm thinking about changing it. It's about 36, I think. Yeah, well, that's passing it on pretty well. So basically, I've got an Ethernet cable plugged into my Pi. My Pi is now supplying Wi-Fi separately. So if you go somewhere where there's a wired network only, you can use a Pi to create a Wi-Fi network. I used to do this years ago. Somewhere I worked, we had a Windows Vista laptop, and I enabled the hotspot on that, and we would all use our mobile phones on it. Back then people had Blackberries and I had a Nokia, and yeah, it's a really nice feature, but probably one I should turn off unless I put in a better password. So if I just click on that, do you want to disconnect, and okay, yeah, super simple. A lot more customization on people with network settings. They talk about Firefox, so this is the browser I'm using now instead of Chrome. First time we've officially supported Firefox. Previously the only version was available was an old version from Debian. Worked closely with Mozilla and Firefox, enabling v4L2 codec. So we can use H.264 decoder for video on older models of Raspberry Pi. Significantly improves performance and reduces CPU load when playing back HD video. Enabled support for widevine, so that's like Spotify and Netflix and various, it's an encryption. So it means that you can use those streaming services where quite a lot of devices you can't, especially with Linux. Video calling, Raspberry Pi OS works out of the box with CSI cameras. So that's the 2 camera ports that you can see on the Pi 5, but Pis have had them for years. Documentation. So this is something, as someone who's having the beta builds and testing it, there's not a lot of documentation about, and so you have to go to the forum. To be fair, you know, one of the really strong things about the Raspberry Pi is that that forum is incredibly useful, and people do reply and people do fix things, whereas, you know, I get a lot of competition about, you know, which single board computer is the best and things like that, and everybody goes just down the route of pure power. And we don't really know how powerful the Raspberry Pi 5 is at this stage. I think it's been great so far, but when we get proper GPU support, when I can overclock, when I get my 5 volt, 5 amp adapter, I think it will fly. And especially with Linux, because Linux gets such good support, but also it'll be interesting to see when Android comes out, because Android tends to have really good support on ARM devices anyway. So then I'll be thinking about doing speed tests and comparisons with other single board computers, but until then it's a bit of a tricky one to 100% do it. But I'm not avoiding it, I've got loads of other things I want to do before I get to that stage. So there's a few things missing. To be fair, I mean, this is loads of work has gone into this, and they were changing things very recently, because my KDE Plasma, I couldn't get to work on some of the builds, and I was sent a little fix that basically meant that it would work, but they've implemented that into the updates, and that happened almost straight away. Compensation for displays which use overscan is tricky under Wayland. So the overscan bit is when you start up older versions of Raspberry Pi software, it would often have a black border around the edge, and that's to compensate for some displays where it would overlap, so you'd be missing something. I haven't had that happen on any of my monitors for ages, but obviously it's something they're going to work on. So some people may be affected by it, but most people's monitors won't. Some applications need to be updated in order for their icons to appear there. So it looks like, what was that on the system tray? Okay, so along here you might find some icons not showing up. So it'll probably come with a blank icon or something like that. Or remote desktop access. A new VNC server is being used instead of real VNC. A bit more restrictive in terms of the client applications which can connect to it. We've had good results with Tiger VNC available here. So the 64-bit version, we're waiting to update from real VNC. In the meantime, if you do need remote desktop access on Raspberry Pi 0, 1, 2 or 3, we recommend sticking with Bullseye for the time being. So SenseHat emulator is missing, and they're working on it. magnifier accessibility tool doesn't work with Wayfire. Oh, but it's got its own one. Control Alt M to turn it on and off. Yeah, that works. Control M. The BlueJ and Greenfoot Java IDEs are incompatible with Wayland, and Sonic Pi is incompatible with Pipewire. Not something that affects me. All these changes are designed to bring Raspberry Pi OS more into line with what other Linux distributions are doing. Many are making or have already made the switch to Wayland, Pipewire and Network Manager. This then gives us a good platform for future development. It's nice to be on a more standard platform. So, you know, most people are using the same system, so compatibility tends to be better, which is something in the past, you know, maybe with ARM you'd struggle on because they more concentrate on x86 or x64, so like PCs or laptops. But over the years, ARM devices have been really strong, and you know, my MacBook Air runs on an ARM processor, and it's stunning. So they're not suggesting you upgrade from Bullseye to Bookworm. Any attempt to do this will almost certainly end up with a non-booting desktop and data loss. I recommend create an SD card using Raspberry Pi Imager or to download and flash a Bookworm image. Okay, so let's have a look and see what we've got. So we've got H.26405 is already there, and it enables H.26405, but they're not blocking 60 FPS video. So let's see what happens with YouTube with a 1080-60 video. And let's pick 1080 on here, auto 480, 1080 and full screen. And let's go right click and stats for nerds. They always, you know, YouTube often stutters when it starts up, but let's see what happens after it's been going for a little bit. So it is dropping frames, 260, 270. Yeah, it is still dropping frames. So to combat that for now, because actually when you look at the video, oh no, you can see it dropping a bit. So if I enable block 60 FPS, because remember that Hollywood movies are 24 frames a second, mostly, and have been for years and years, and most TV wouldn't be at 60 frames per second. So 30 looks absolutely fine. But you'll find, so I'll have to refresh this, so F5, and then is that gonna go back to play? I wanted to pick 720. Oh, okay, so we've, why has it only got a 720 option? That's weird. This is, I think this is 30 FPS anyway. It says HD, although 720 counts as HD. Oh, there you go, 1080. So it depends on the video. I think it just means that YouTube doesn't have a version of it in 30 FPS. But if we right click and do stats for nerds, so it's now not dropping frames. So 1080 30 is fine, but 1080 60 still on YouTube playback isn't great. Let's just do a few BBC News, see how well that comes up. Accept the Google bit. Oh, and let's go for News Home. Yeah, it's working. I wouldn't say it was as fast as Chrome. It feels a bit more stuttery than Chrome for me, and I've been using Chrome on this for well over a month now. But we'll see with all the improvements that come in the future. But all of this, yeah, super straightforward. When I install my KDE Plasma, I get the Discover store, which is a better store for installing apps. The one thing I don't like about the add remove software on Raspberry Pi OS is that it just shows up loads of things. So if I want to put in SNES, let's just see if it comes up with something for SNES. It will probably come up with, yeah, loads of things. Now there will be a SNES emulator in there, and you can see there's a Game Boy Advance emulator, but it tends to almost give you too much information. It'd be nice to, what does it say? Only newest versions, only native packages. Oh, maybe there is. Maybe you can do this. So if we do only newest versions, what does it do? Pretty much the same. Only native packages. So if we turn off the other one, the newest versions. Nah, it's still the same, isn't it? because even if I do games, then you tend to find that there's a lot of stuff in there that's not just games. I'm going to prove myself right. Yeah, like data files and things like that. So it'd be nice to have just something that works a bit more like an app store that we're used to on our phones or our tablets and things like that. You can see Dolphin is in there, the Dolphin emulator, which I've done videos on already. But the Discover store, I think, is much nicer in the way it looks, the way it gives you reviews and screenshots and things like that. But we've always got to remember that they keep this incredibly basic so that it works across all the devices. And Linux is so customizable, and I'll show videos on how to customize it and add things to it. And I always use Raspberry Pi OS as the base because that's the standard for everybody. So if someone designs a program or an app or a game to work, then it's going to work with Raspberry Pi OS first rather than some other Linux distributions. But just changing the desktop environment means that you get, I think, a much more functional desktop. Still nice and fast on a Raspberry Pi 5, but just more functionality. That's what I prefer anyway. But I know that in my comments, some people have said that they really like Raspberry Pi OS as an operating system and the way it works. I really like the way that you can also just start typing. So I press the Windows key and start typing Chrome, it will launch that without me having to search for it in the bar. So I like the way that works. And this is great work because it is very stable. I really have had a good time testing out this beta software, and now I guess it's out of beta because there was no mention of it on Raspberry Pi Imager. I don't think there's any other Pi 5 software available at this stage. Choose OS. So Raspberry Pi OS, and it just said, yeah, 64-bit 10th of the 10th. Doesn't mention anything about beta or anything like that. So great work by everybody involved, but I will be putting KDE Plasma Desktop on mine, and I'll do videos on how to do that. Now we've got an official version of it, I'll show how you do that if you want to customize your desktop environment. Okay, so I hope this helps. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe.